Everybody quotes this movie. I'm your huckleberry. You tell 'em I'm comin', and hell's comin' with me. Lines that live rent-free in the heads of anyone who has ever loved a Western. But underneath all that quotable swagger sits a story most of the people singing along have never actually heard. A story about a movie that was falling apart in real time, a movie star who secretly ran the whole production while pretending he wasn't, and one actor who looked at what was happening and refused to go along with it. That actor was Sam Elliott, and what he understood about Tombstone changes the way you watch the entire film. To understand what Sam Elliott was fighting for, you have to go back to 1993, when the Western was considered box office poison. The genre that built Hollywood had been gathering dust for decades, and into that dead space walked a screenwriter named Kevin Gere, fresh off the Oscar-winning success of Glory. Gere wrote a Tombstone script so dense with period detail and character work that it pulled in an ensemble most directors only dream about. Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, Sam Elliott as Virgil Earp, Bill Paxton as Morgan Earp, along with Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Dana Delaney, Stephen Lang, and narration from Robert Mitchum. Gere wasn't just writing it. This was supposed to be his directorial debut. He pushed for total authenticity, right down to insisting the cast grow and style real period mustaches. It became a point of pride on set, a shared badge of commitment to a script the actors genuinely believed in. Then reality hit. Directing a massive ensemble Western with horses, extras, and gunfights turned out to be nothing like writing one. According to the Tombstone Wikipedia entry and multiple retrospectives from outlets like Screen Rant and CBR, Gere fell behind schedule almost immediately. He reportedly wanted to shoot in sweeping, John Ford-style master shots, and producers worried that approach would leave the studio unable to control the final cut in the editing room. A month into filming, producer Andrew Vajna fired him. At that point, the production had a half-finished movie, an actor's revolt brewing, and no director. This is exactly the moment when the film's best-kept secret begins. When Gere was let go, the studio brought in George P. Cosmatos, a journeyman action director best known for Rambo, First Blood Part 2, and Cobra. For over a decade, the official record credited Cosmatos alone. His name is still the only one on the poster. It wasn't the whole truth. Kurt Russell had personally gone to producer Andy Vajna and helped secure roughly $25 million in financing for the picture, effectively staking his own reputation on getting it made. So when Gere was fired, the studio turned to Russell and asked him to take over. Russell agreed to do the work, but he refused the title. In a 2006 interview with True West magazine, Russell described the arrangement bluntly. He backed the original director, that director got fired, so we brought in a guy to be a ghost director. He told the producers he'd do the job, but didn't want his name on it. Russell recommended Cosmatos on the advice of Sylvester Stallone, who had used Cosmatos in a similar arrangement on Rambo, First Blood Part 2. Every night during the Tombstone shoot, Russell says he handed Cosmatos a shot list for the next day's scenes. Cosmatos would then show up and direct exactly what was on that list. Russell told Cosmatos he wouldn't reveal any of this while Cosmatos was alive. Cosmatos died in 2005, and Russell went public with the story the following year. Val Kilmer later backed up much of this account, though with a bit more nuance. In a blog post reported by The Hollywood Reporter, Kilmer wrote that Russell sacrificed his own role and energy to devote himself as a storyteller, describing how Russell worked out shot lists at night to help Cosmatos, who arrived with only 2 days of prep. Kilmer stopped short of saying Russell was the literal director, but he was unequivocal about the credit Russell deserved, writing that Russell was solely responsible for Tombstone's success. Not every cast member experienced it the same way. Michael Biehn has said Russell never personally directed him, and Dana Delaney has spoken positively of working directly with Cosmatos. But the through line across nearly every account is the same. When Russell started reshaping the movie behind the scenes, the entire cast had to decide whether to go along with it. Most of them did. One did not. Once Russell effectively took the wheel, he made the call that would define everything that followed. Jar's original script was, by Russell's own later description, simply too big and too expensive to finish with the time and money the production had left. So Russell and producer James Jacks, along with uncredited screenwriter John Fasano, brought in to help patch the script during the crisis, started cutting. According to Fasano's own account in True West magazine's 20th anniversary oral history of the film, the goal was survival, not sabotage. Entire subplots disappeared. Supporting characters played by actors like Billy Zane and Jason Priestley lost most of their material. The sprawling Earp Vendetta ride section of Jar's script was compressed dramatically. Russell has said the cuts amounted to something close to 20 to 30 pages of material, depending on which account you read. Sam Elliott would later put the number at 29. Russell's stated reasoning was that the film needed a single, clear emotional spine, and he chose the bond between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. He has described that friendship as one of the great love stories in the film, deep and loyal even though it's never spoken about directly by the characters. To sharpen that relationship, nearly everything else in the sprawling ensemble piece had to give way. To his credit, Russell didn't spare his own role. Fasano's account, and Russell's own retelling, describe him repeatedly instructing the writers to hand his lines off to other characters rather than protect his own screen time. Val Kilmer reportedly told Russell he could cut all of Doc Holliday's dialogue if it helped, joking that he'd steal every scene anyway just by fingering his little tin cup. Powers Booth and Bill Paxton, among others, gave up material without a fight, sweating through Arizona heat that reportedly hit 134 degrees in period-will costumes. According to Fasano, everyone cooperated with the trims. Everyone except Sam Elliott. Fasano's account, published by True West magazine, includes a line that has become part of Tombstone legend. While the rest of the cast handed over pages without complaint, Sam Elliott told the production flatly that if they cut a word of his dialogue, he would kill them. It's easy to hear that as set banter, the kind of gruff joke that circulates on any tense shoot. And there's no reason to think Elliott meant it literally. But underneath the joke was something real, and it's the piece of this story most fans have never connected. Elliott wasn't protecting his ego. He was protecting a script he genuinely believed in. In a 1993 interview with Entertainment Weekly, published around the film's release, Elliott didn't hedge about what he thought of Jar's original draft. He said the screenplay, in its initial form, was one of the best he had ever read. Then he said something far more pointed. If he had been handed the script in the condensed shape it eventually took on screen, he would have turned the role down entirely. That is a remarkable thing for an actor to say about a film he's actively promoting. Elliott told EW that the cuts had stripped out what he called the connective tissue, the quieter character beats that gave the story its depth, and specifically cited the loss of around 29 pages of material. There's a reason this hit Elliott harder than almost anyone else in the cast. Virgil Earp, his character, was one of the roles most affected by the trims. In Jar's fuller script, Virgil was positioned as the true moral center of the family, the brother whose conviction pushes the Earps to pin on badges in the first place. Much of the quieter material that built that version of Virgil, the connective tissue Elliott kept referencing, is exactly the kind of scene that gets cut first when a production is racing against a Christmas release date. So when Elliott drew his line, he wasn't defending dialogue for its own sake. He was defending the only version of his own character that he had fallen in love with on the page. That tension, Russell cutting for survival and momentum, Elliott fighting to preserve Jar's fuller, slower vision, runs underneath every frame of the finished film, even if most audiences have never had a reason to notice it. Here's what makes the story more than just an interesting production anecdote. Sam Elliott wasn't the only person connected to Tombstone who came to believe the film could have been something far bigger. In that same 2006 True West interview, Kurt Russell, the man who did the actual cutting, described Jar's original vision in striking terms. He called it The Godfather, a Western Godfather, and said that's how different the fuller version was from what audiences eventually saw. Stephen Lang, who played Ike Clanton, echoed that comparison in a separate interview, describing Jar's script as essentially The Godfather transplanted to 1880s Arizona, and saying flatly that it was that good. This isn't nostalgia talking. Russell has kept circling back to it for decades. In a 1993 Entertainment Weekly piece published around the film's release, Russell acknowledged that Gere might never have finished directing the movie himself, but stood behind the changes as necessary to get Tombstone over the finish line at all. Decades later, his tone had shifted. In a 2026 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, more than 30 years after the film's release, Russell said he would never fully make peace with what happened to Tombstone. He put it plainly, "It could have been a lot better. Not just a better Western, one of the great movies, period, rather than one of the great Westerns." That's an unusual thing to hear from the person most responsible for the shape of a beloved classic. Russell has also mentioned, in that same interview, that footage from the original, more expansive shoot still exists, reportedly sitting in storage. He's talked about the idea of eventually going back to his old notes and reconstructing more of Gere's version, even recalling a hospital scene between Wyatt and Doc that Gere had written for a different ending. As of now, no such reconstruction has happened, and there's no confirmed timeline for one. So the fuller, richer Tombstone that Sam Elliott fought to protect in 1993 still exists only in memory, in a handful of interviews, and possibly in a garage somewhere in Los Angeles. Once you understand how close this production came to falling apart, the smaller what-ifs start to matter more. The role of Doc Holliday, the performance that turned Val Kilmer into a legend, was originally intended for Willem Dafoe. According to multiple retrospectives, including reporting referenced by Screen Rant and CBR, Buena Vista, the Disney-owned studio distributing the film, refused to finance a picture built around Dafoe because of the lingering controversy over his role in Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ 5 years earlier. That refusal is the entire reason Kilmer ended up in the part. There was also a brief, almost absurd moment where the film's core pairing nearly changed entirely. Russell has recounted that producer Andy Vajna, only weeks before filming began, floated the idea of Russell playing Doc Holliday instead, with Richard Gere stepping in as Wyatt Earp. Russell says he considered it seriously enough to lose sleep over it before deciding to stick with the plan already in motion. And then there was Kevin Costner. Costner had originally developed the Wyatt Earp story with Gere before the two split over creative direction, with Costner opting to make his own, more expansive biopic, Wyatt Earp, instead. According to several accounts of the production, Costner then used his industry leverage to discourage major studios from financing or distributing Tombstone, leaving Buena Vista as the only studio willing to take the project on. Some retrospectives also describe efforts by Costner's camp to secure authentic Western wardrobe pieces ahead of the Tombstone production, forcing Gere's team to source costumes from Europe instead. Tombstone survived a fired director, a secretly reassigned one, a gutted script, a near-total cast swap, and a rival production actively working against it. And then, against all of that, it worked. Tombstone opened in December 1993 and went on to gross north of $73 million worldwide, making it one of the most successful westerns of the modern era. Costner's Wyatt Earp, the rival production that had tried to starve Tombstone of financing, arrived the following year to a much cooler reception and weaker box office. The lean, tightly focused version of Tombstone, the one built around Russell's cuts rather than Gere's sprawling original, is the version that connected with audiences. Stripping the story down to the bond between Wyatt and Doc gave the film a propulsive, quotable energy that a 3-hour ensemble epic might not have had. The film became a cult classic in large part because it moved. That's the irony sitting at the heart of this whole story. The very cuts Sam Elliott fought against, the trims he believed gutted the film's soul, may be exactly what made Tombstone work as a piece of popular entertainment. And the film Elliott wanted to protect, the fuller, Godfather-sized version that Russell and Stephen Lang still talk about with something like reverence, might never have found the same audience, or might never have been finished at all. So who was right? The evidence suggests both of them were, in different ways. Russell made the brutal, practical calls that turned an over-budget, half-shot production into a movie audiences could actually watch and love. Elliot fought to preserve the character work and connective tissue that gave the story emotional weight underneath all the one-liners, and some of that fight clearly succeeded, since Virgil Earp remains one of the most quietly powerful performances in the film. What Sam Elliott understood, more clearly than almost anyone else on that set, was what got left behind. He had read Kevin Gere's fuller script. He knew what those 29 pages contained, and he knew that once they were gone, they weren't coming back. His refusal to hand over his own dialogue wasn't vanity, it was a small, stubborn act of preservation, one actor trying to hold on to a version of the story he believed in, even as the production reshaped itself around him. Every classic line in Tombstone is, in a very real sense, a survivor of that process. And somewhere in a garage in Los Angeles, by Kurt Russell's own account, the rest of Kevin Jarre's Western Godfather is still sitting in the dark, waiting for someone to decide it's worth finishing.